The first plow broke clean in half before noon, splintering like kindling against what looked like ordinary brown earth. And Beatrice Fontaine had already lost $300 she did not have. She stood in the middle of her 160 acres, sweat soaking through her cotton dress despite the November chill that swept down from the Sierra Nevada, staring at the ruined equipment as if willpower alone might weld the metal back together. The land agent in Jamestown, California, had assured her this was prime farming country, fertile soil just waiting for a woman brave enough to stake her claim under the Homestead Act of 1862. It was 1878 now, 16 years since that promise of land and opportunity had drawn thousands west, and Beatrice had spent every cent she possessed on filing fees, supplies, and that cursed plow. She was 23 years old, alone, and approximately 1,000 miles from anyone who gave a damn whether she lived or died. The sun burned overhead despite the season, turning the valley into a shimmering haze of gold and brown. Beatrice pulled off her bonnet and used it to mop her face, revealing dark hair pinned in a practical bun and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her hands were already blistered from 2 weeks of attempting to work this God-forsaken patch of earth, and her back ached something fierce, but she had filed the claim and signed the papers. 5 years of proving up this land, building a home, cultivating crops, and it would be hers. 5 years stood between her and something no one could ever take away. She would die before she quit. Beatrice was examining the broken plow, trying to determine if any part could be salvaged, when she heard the horse approaching. She straightened, one hand instinctively going to the rifle she kept propped against the canvas tent that currently served as her home. A rider was coming across the valley floor, moving at an easy lope that suggested he was in no particular hurry. The man who rode up was tall and lean, sitting his horse like he had been born in the saddle. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, worn but well-maintained, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone completely at home in this landscape. He reined in his horse about 20 feet away, polite distance for a stranger, and touched the brim of his hat. "Afternoon, miss," he said. His voice was low and warm with a slight drawl that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "Name's Samuel Ortiz. I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles east of here." Beatrice kept her hand near the rifle but nodded acknowledgement. "Beatrice Fontaine, this is my land." Something flickered in his dark eyes, too quick to identify. "Yes, madam, I know. Folks in town have been talking about the woman who filed on the widow's 100. The widow's 100. Samuel shifted in his saddle, and Beatrice noticed he had the kind of face that looked honest, open, with laugh lines around his eyes and a mouth that seemed made for smiling. He was not smiling now. That is what people call this land. 3 different homesteaders have tried to prove it up in the last 10 years. All of them quit within 6 months. The last one was a widow woman named Carlson. She lasted the longest, nearly 8 months, but the land broke her in the end. "Well," Beatrice said, lifting her chin, "I am not breaking." Samuel's gaze traveled to the shattered plow, then back to her face. "I see you have met the rocks." Rocks, he dismounted in one fluid motion, ground tying his horse with casual expertise. Beatrice tensed, but he made no move toward her, instead walking to the furrow she had been attempting to carve in the earth. He crouched down, running his fingers through the soil. When he looked up at her, his expression was sympathetic. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the ground. Beatrice nodded, curiosity overriding caution. Samuel pulled a knife from his belt and began digging in the dirt. About 6 inches down, The blade struck something with a decisive clink. He worked the soil loose with his hands, revealing a stone the size of a man's head, and then another, and another. Your land sits on top of an old riverbed. The soil you see on top is good, rich earth, but underneath is nothing but river rock, layer after layer of it. Regular plows cannot cut through, they just break themselves trying. Beatrice stared at the exposed stones, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. How deep does it go? Depends on where you are on the property. Some places may be a foot, others 3 or 4 feet down. The Carlson widow tried to clear it by hand, picking out rocks one by one, but there are just too many. It would take a dozen men working for years to clear enough ground to farm properly. Then, what do you suggest I do? The words came out sharper than she intended. Edged with desperation, she immediately regretted showing. Samuel stood, brushing dirt from his hands. Most folks would suggest you abandon the claim, file on different land. I cannot afford different land. I spent everything I had on this claim and the supplies to work it. He studied her for a long moment, and Beatrice had the unsettling sensation of being truly seen, of having this stranger look past her defenses and understand exactly how precarious her situation was. Then I suggest you find a different way to work it. Land this stubborn does not want to be farmed. Maybe it wants something else. Such as, cattle can graze on rocky ground just fine, or sheep, though I do not recommend sheep if you want to stay friendly with your neighbors. Goats do not mind rocks at all, or you could try an orchard. Tree roots can work between rocks where plow blades cannot. Beatrice looked across her 160 acres, trying to reimagine them. I do not know anything about raising livestock. No, madam, I expect you do not. Samuel walked back to his horse, then paused with one hand on the saddle horn. But I do, if you are interested in learning. She should have been suspicious, should have questioned why this stranger was offering help. But there was something in his manner, direct and genuine, that made her want to trust him. Why would you help me? Samuel swung into the saddle, settling himself with unconscious grace. Because I have been watching you for 2 weeks now. Every time I ride this section checking the ranch's fence line. I have watched you work from sunup to sundown, watched you wrestle with that plow, watched you refuse to quit even when any sensible person would have. That kind of stubbornness deserves a fighting chance. Heat that had nothing to do with the sun crept into Beatrice's cheeks. You have been watching me. Not in a strange way, he said quickly, and now he did smile, a crooked, self-deprecating expression that transformed his entire face. Just noticed is all. Hard not to notice someone working that hard, I see. Anyway, offer stands. I could bring over some cattle information, maybe help you figure out what might work for your land. No obligation. Beatrice crossed her arms, considering. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won by a narrow margin. I cannot pay you. Did not ask you to. Samuel gathered his reins. I will come by tomorrow afternoon if that suits you. Bring some books that might help. He rode off before she could respond, leaving Beatrice standing beside her broken plow with more questions than answers, and a strange, fluttering sensation in her chest that she absolutely refused to examine. True to his word, Samuel appeared the next afternoon riding a different horse and carrying a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Beatrice had spent the morning attempting to clear rocks by hand, had managed to fill 3 buckets, and had calculated that at this rate she would have the land cleared somewhere around the year 1950. Brought you some things, Samuel said, dismounting. He unwrapped the bundle to reveal several books, their covers worn from use. This one is about cattle ranching basics. This one covers breeds and which ones do best in different climates. And this, he pulled out a slim volume, is about starting small, which I figure might be relevant to your situation. Beatrice took the books carefully, surprised by the weight of them. These must be valuable. I promise I will take care of them. They belong to my father. He would have liked you, I think. He always respected people who worked hard. Samuel's voice carried an edge of something lost maybe, and Beatrice wondered what story lay behind those words. Thank you, she said quietly. Truly. They stood there for a moment in awkward silence, and then Samuel cleared his throat. Right. So, if you want, I could show you around your land a bit, help you get a sense of where the rocks are thickest and where the soil might be deeper. Might help you plan. They spent the next 3 hours walking her property, with Samuel explaining what he saw in a way that slowly began to make sense to Beatrice. He showed her how to read the land, how the slight variations in the color of the soil indicated different depths, how the types of plants growing wild told stories about what lay beneath. Where the prickly pear cactus clustered thick, the rocks were close to the surface. Where the grasslands grew lush, there might be deeper soil. Here, Samuel said, crouching in a section near the eastern boundary. This stretch along this side might work for a garden, vegetables and such. Looks like the soil goes deeper. And this whole southern section would make good grazing if you could get some cattle. I cannot afford cattle. Samuel rocked back on his heels, thinking. What if you ran some of the ranch's cattle on your land? We have more head than we have good grazing for, especially in the dry months. You let our cattle graze here, we pay you for the privilege, and you learn the business. After a year or two, you would know enough to start building your own herd. It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. What does your boss say about that? I am the boss, Samuel said simply. My father started the ranch 20 years ago. When he died last spring, it came to me. Oh, Beatrice sat down in the grass, processing this information. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. Samuel remained crouched, pulling up a stem of wild grass and running it between his fingers. He taught me everything about ranching, but the one thing I wish he had taught me was how to run the business side without wanting to tear my hair out. I am good with cattle and horses. I am terrible with ledgers and contracts and negotiating with buyers. I am good with ledgers, Beatrice offered. I worked as a bookkeeper for a shipping company in St. Louis before I came west. Samuel's head snapped up. Truly, for 5 years. I can manage accounts, do projections, handle correspondence with buyers. I just cannot, she gestured at the rocky earth, make land cooperate that does not want to. A slow smile spread across Samuel's face. Miss Fontaine, I think we might be able to help each other. They worked out the details over the next hour, sitting in the grass like business partners, which Beatrice supposed they were becoming. Samuel would bring 30 head of cattle to graze on her land, paying her a monthly fee that would allow her to buy supplies and equipment. In exchange, she would come to the ranch twice a week to help him sort out his bookkeeping mess and teach him the basics of business management. It was practical, sensible, and would solve problems for both of them. It was also an excuse to see each other regularly. Though neither of them said that out loud, over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Samuel came to Beatrice's land every few days, ostensibly to check on the cattle, though they both knew the animals needed far less supervision than he provided. He helped her build a small barn from rough-cut lumber, taught her how to read brands and identify common cattle ailments, showed her the difference between a sick animal and a healthy one. In turn, Beatrice rode to his ranch on Tuesdays and Fridays, bringing order to accounting books that had apparently not been properly balanced in over a year. The ranch house surprised her the first time she saw it. A sprawling adobe structure built in the Spanish style with a red tile roof and a courtyard garden that someone had once tended with care, but that had gone somewhat wild. Samuel showed her into an office cluttered with papers, ledgers stacked haphazardly on every surface, and a desk that appeared to be held together primarily by hope. "It is worse than it looks," Samuel said apologetically. "I do not see how that is possible," Beatrice replied, but she was already rolling up her sleeves, her fingers itching to bring order to the chaos. She discovered that Samuel was right about his skill with animals. The accounts showed a thriving operation with healthy profits from cattle sales, but the financial records were a disaster. Bills went unpaid not from lack of funds, but because they got lost in the shuffle. He had nearly double paid one supplier while completely forgetting to pay another. It was a miracle the ranch had not collapsed under the weight of its own disorganization. "How did your father manage this?" Beatrice asked, 3 hours into sorting papers into coherent piles. Samuel looked up from the correspondence he was supposed to be reading. He had been watching her work instead, fascinated by the quick efficiency of her hands, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated. "He had my mother. She ran the business side while he ran the cattle. When she died 8 years ago, he sort of fell apart, started letting things slide. I tried to help, but I was only 17 and did not understand half of it. And when your father died, I inherited the mess." Samuel stood and stretched, walking to the window that overlooked the courtyard. "I have been holding it together by my fingernails for the past 7 months. I cannot tell you what a relief it is to have someone who actually knows what they are doing looking at this." Beatrice felt a warm glow of pride at his words. She had been good at her job in St. Louis, but her employer had never acknowledged her work beyond her salary. Certainly never thanked her. "We will get it sorted out. It will take time, but it is not unfixable. I believe you." Samuel turned from the window, and his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I believe you could fix just about anything you set your mind to." The moment stretched between them, charged with something unnamed, until Beatrice forced herself to look back at the ledgers. "I should finish these accounts before it gets dark. I want to ride home before sunset." "Stay for dinner," Samuel said quickly. "Please. My cook makes enough for an army, and it would be nice to have company." She should have said no, should have maintained proper boundaries between business associates. But the thought of riding back to her lonely tent, eating cold beans from a can while night settled over her stubborn land, was suddenly unbearable. "All right, thank you." Dinner was served in a dining room that showed signs of former elegance now faded, and the cook turned out to be a grizzled man named Martinez, who had worked for Samuel's father since the beginning. He brought out plates of beef stew rich with vegetables, fresh bread, and a flan for dessert that melted on Beatrice's tongue like sweetened silk. "Martinez thinks I am going to starve if I do not eat 3 full meals a day," Samuel said, shaking his head. "I keep telling him I can cook for myself." "The boss makes terrible coffee and worse eggs," Martinez said in heavily accented English, refilling Beatrice's water glass. "Is good you are here, miss. Maybe you teach him to not burn everything." Beatrice laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that made Samuel grin. "I am not sure my cooking is much better, honestly." "Cannot be worse," Martinez muttered, heading back to the kitchen. After dinner, Samuel walked Beatrice out to her horse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air had gone cool and sweet. Beatrice gathered her reins, preparing to mount, when Samuel's hand came to rest gently on her arm. "Beatrice," he said, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "These past weeks, getting to know you, working with you, it has been the best thing to happen to me in a long time. I just wanted you to know that." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "It has been good for me too. I was so alone when I first came here, so overwhelmed. You have given me hope that I can actually make this work." "You would have made it work regardless," Samuel said. "You are the most determined person I have ever met, but I am glad I could help." They stood close in the gathering dark, and Beatrice was acutely aware of his hand still on her arm, the warmth of him, the way he smelled of leather and sage and something uniquely himself. It would be so easy to lean in, to close the small distance between them, to discover if his lips were as soft as they looked. Instead, she stepped back, swinging into the saddle with practiced ease. "I should go. Thank you for dinner." If Samuel was disappointed, he hid it well. "Ride safe. I will see you in a few days." Beatrice rode home through the darkening landscape, her mind whirling. She could not afford to fall in love. Love was a distraction she did not have room for, not when she was fighting for her survival, for her land, for her future. Samuel was a business partner, a friend if she was lucky, and nothing more. She repeated that to herself every day for the next 2 weeks, and did not believe it for a single moment. Winter came to the Sierra Nevada foothills with cold nights and days that alternated between brilliant sunshine and gray rain. Beatrice used some of her earnings from the grazing fees to buy lumber and build a small cabin, one room with a fireplace and real walls that did not flap in the wind. Samuel came to help with the construction, along with 2 of his ranch hands, and what would have taken her weeks alone was finished in 4 days. "It is not much," Beatrice said, standing in her completed cabin, "but it is mine." "It is a good, solid structure," Samuel assured her. "You did the design yourself." "I worked from a plan I found in a book, but modified it for my needs." She showed him the various clever features she had incorporated. A loft for sleeping that would stay warmer, windows positioned to catch the morning sun, a root cellar dug into the floor for storing vegetables. "I am thinking of planting a garden in the spring, in that section you showed me with the deeper soil." "That is a fine idea." Samuel ran his hand along the doorframe, testing the joints. "You are proving up this land properly, building a home, making it productive. The land office will have to approve your claim. Assuming I can last 5 years. You will last," Samuel said with such confidence that Beatrice almost believed him. December brought the first real storm, 3 days of steady rain that turned the valley into a temporary lake and tested every seal in Beatrice's new cabin. She spent the time reading Samuel's ranching books by lamplight, making notes, planning for the future. When the rain finally stopped, she woke to find the landscape transformed, everything green and fresh, the hills dressed in new grass. She also woke to discover that her tent, which she had been using for storage, had collapsed under the weight of water and was now a sodden, useless mess. Everything inside it, her spare clothes, her food supplies, half her tools, was either ruined or damaged beyond immediate use. Beatrice stood in the mud, looking at the destruction, and felt tears prick her eyes. She was so tired of fighting, so exhausted from the constant struggle to keep going in the face of endless obstacles. For a dangerous moment, she understood why the previous homesteaders had quit. Beatrice. She turned to find Samuel riding up, his horse picking careful steps through the muddy ground. He took one look at her face, at the collapsed tent, and dismounted immediately. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad enough." Her voice came out thick with unshed tears. "I lost most of my supplies. I have what is in the cabin, but that is not much." Samuel walked to the tent and began pulling out items, assessing damage. "Some of this can be salvaged. The tools just need drying and oiling. But the food and fabric is gone. You are right about that." He straightened, his expression thoughtful. "Come stay at the ranch until you can replace your supplies." "I cannot do that." "Why not?" "I have more empty bedrooms than I know what to do with. You can have your own room, completely proper. Martinez will be delighted to have someone to cook for who actually appreciates his efforts. And frankly, Samuel's voice softened, I think you could use a few days where someone else takes care of you for a change. The offer was tempting, dangerously so. What will people say? People already talk. They have been talking since the day you filed your claim. Might as well give them something real to discuss. Beatrice knew she should refuse, knew that accepting would compromise her reputation, complicate their relationship, blur lines that should remain clear. But she was cold, tired, and so achingly lonely that the thought of a few days of company, of warm meals and conversation, and not having to be strong every single moment was irresistible. Just for a few days, she said, until I can get to town and buy new supplies. However long you need, Samuel said, and the way he looked at her made her heart skip. She packed what undamaged possessions she had, loaded them on her horse, and followed Samuel to his ranch. Martinez greeted her arrival with undisguised pleasure, immediately showing her to a bedroom that was clearly meant for a woman, with a high bed covered in a quilt and lace curtains on the windows. Was the boss's mother's room, Martinez explained. She would be happy to have another lady here. Beatrice ran her hand over the quilt, beautifully stitched in a pattern of interlocking rings. It is lovely. That night, she sat down to dinner with Samuel in the formal dining room, and it felt oddly like playing house, like trying on a life that might have been hers under different circumstances. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation ranging from cattle prices to books to childhood memories. Samuel told her about growing up on the ranch, learning to ride before he could properly walk, following his father around and absorbing knowledge by proximity. What about you? He asked. What was your life like before you came west? Beatrice hesitated, old pain flickering. Ordinary. I lived with my aunt in St. Louis after my parents died of cholera when I was 12. She was not unkind, but she made it clear I was a burden. I went to work as soon as I was old enough, saved every penny I could. When the land agent came through talking about opportunities in California, free land for anyone brave enough to claim it, I knew it was my chance to have something of my own. Do you miss St. Louis? No. The answer came without hesitation. I do not miss the city or my aunt or that life. This is hard, harder than anything I have ever done, but it is mine. No one can tell me I am a burden here. I succeed or fail by my own efforts. Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. You are succeeding, Beatrice. I know it does not always feel like it, but you are. You have a home, a plan for your land, a future being built. That is more than most people manage. His hand was warm around hers, calloused from work, strong and sure. Beatrice knew she should pull away but could not make herself do it. Thank you for believing in me, for helping me when you had no reason to. I had a reason, Samuel said quietly. From the first moment I saw you, standing in that field with your broken plow, refusing to cry even though I could see you wanted to, I knew you were someone special, someone worth knowing, Samuel. I know this is complicated. I know you came here to be independent, not to get tangled up with a rancher who cannot balance his own books. But I have to tell you, Beatrice, these months of knowing you have been the happiest I can remember. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make everything better just by being around. And I do not want to just be your business partner anymore. I want more than that. Beatrice's throat was tight. What are you saying? I am saying that I am falling in love with you, maybe already have fallen. And I needed you to know that, even if you do not feel the same way. She stood abruptly, pulling her hand from his, pacing to the window. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass, a woman poised between what she had planned and what she wanted. "I do feel the same way," she said finally, not turning around. "That is the problem." She heard Samuel stand, heard him cross the room to stand behind her. He did not touch her, but she could feel the warmth of him, close enough that she could lean back and find support if she chose. "Why is that a problem?" "Because I cannot afford to need anyone. The moment I start depending on you, I lose my independence. I become someone you take care of instead of someone who takes care of herself." "Loving someone is not the same as being dependent on them," Samuel said gently. "My parents loved each other, but they were partners. They each had their own strengths, their own domains. My mother ran the business, my father ran the cattle, and together they built something neither could have managed alone. That is what I want, Beatrice. Not to take care of you, but to build something together." She turned then, looking up into his face. "What if I fail? What if I cannot prove up my land, cannot make it work? Then we figure out something else. But you are not going to fail. I have never met anyone as stubborn as you, and I mean that as the highest compliment." A laugh escaped her, watery but genuine. "I am very stubborn. Impossibly so." Samuel raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek. "But that is one of the things I love about you." Beatrice leaned into his touch, letting herself have this moment of weakness. "This is terrifying. I know. I have never felt this way about anyone, neither have I. If we do this, if we try, you have to promise me something, anything. Promise me you will never treat me as less than equal, that you will not try to fix my problems without asking first or make decisions about my land without consulting me. Promise me we will be partners in truth, not just in name." Samuel's eyes were serious, intent. "I promise." "Your land is yours. Your decisions are yours. All I want is to stand beside you while you make them, if you will let me." Beatrice rose on her toes and kissed him, a soft press of lips that sent warmth cascading through her entire body. Samuel made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss, and Beatrice felt something inside her unlock, a door she had kept firmly bolted swinging open to let in light. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "So, is that a yes to courting?" "That is a yes to courting," Beatrice confirmed, "though I maintain my own home and my own land. Would not have it any other way." They stood wrapped in each other's arms while the fire crackled and the night deepened around them, and Beatrice thought that maybe, just maybe, she could have both things she wanted: her independence and someone to share it with. The next few months passed in a blur of work and joy. Beatrice returned to her cabin but spent increasing amounts of time at the ranch, helping Samuel with his accounts and learning the intricacies of running a large cattle operation. He, in turn, helped her prepare her land for planting, using his connections to find fruit tree saplings at good prices and advising her on which varieties would do best in the rocky soil. In March of 1879, they planted her orchard together. 100 apple trees set in neat rows across the southern section of her property where the soil was deepest. It was hard, back-breaking work, digging holes among the rocks, but Samuel worked beside her every step of the way, and in the evenings they would sit on her porch and watch the sunset paint the hills gold. "It will be 3 years before these trees bear fruit," Beatrice said one evening, her head resting on Samuel's shoulder, "and 5 before I get a decent harvest." "Good thing you have 4 more years to prove up your claim then," Samuel replied. "The timing works out perfectly." "Are you always this optimistic?" "Only since I met you." Their courtship was conducted under the interested eyes of everyone in Jamestown, and opinion was divided on whether the arrangement was scandalous or romantic. Some of the town ladies sniffed disapprovingly at a woman living alone and keeping company with an unmarried man. Others thought it was wonderfully modern. The men mostly seemed to respect Beatrice for her stubborn refusal to give up on her land, though a few made remarks about Samuel being tied around her finger. "Let them talk," Samuel said when Beatrice expressed concern about his reputation. "I do not care what they think." Easy for you to say. You are a man and a landowner. Your reputation can survive scandal. So can yours. You have proven yourself too valuable for this community to lose. Half the ranchers around here are already asking if you might do their books too. This was true. Word had spread about Beatrice's accounting skills, and she had been approached by 3 different ranchers about managing their finances. She had agreed to take on one additional client, a widow woman named Sarah Hendricks, who ran a small horse ranch and who reminded Beatrice of what she might become in 20 years. Fiercely independent and completely uninterested in other people's opinions. Summer brought heat, and the hard work of haying, of moving cattle to higher pastures, of tending the young orchard through its first drought. Beatrice learned to irrigate from the creek that ran along her northern boundary, rigging a system of channels that brought water to her thirsty trees. Samuel showed her how to check the cattle for disease and injury, how to read the signs of weather changes in the behavior of animals. In August, Beatrice turned 24, and Samuel took her to Sacramento for the weekend, a trip that felt impossibly luxurious. They stayed in a hotel in separate rooms, properly chaperoned, and spent 2 days exploring the city. Samuel bought her a new dress, deep green fabric that brought out the color of her eyes, and took her to dinner at the finest restaurant she had ever seen. "You did not have to do all this," Beatrice said, but she was smiling as she said it. "I wanted to. You work so hard, Beatrice. You deserve to be spoiled once in a while." They walked along the river as the sun set, and Samuel took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I have been thinking about the future. Oh, about your land and my ranch and what happens when you prove up your claim. We would have adjoining properties, essentially. It would make sense to combine operations." Beatrice's heart began to race. "Samuel, what are you asking?" He stopped walking and turned to face her, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I am asking if you would marry me. Not now. I know you need to prove up your claim first, establish your ownership beyond question. But someday, when you are ready, would you consider becoming my wife?" Beatrice stared at the ring in the box, a simple gold band with a small emerald that caught the light. "You want to wait until I prove my claim. I want you to know that I am not trying to get your land or take over what you have built. When we marry, if we marry, it will be because you choose to, not because you need to. Your land will remain yours, managed however you want, but I am hoping that maybe you will choose to combine your life with mine." Tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks, and she laughed through them. "You are the most wonderful man I have ever met. Is that a yes?" "That is a yes. I will marry you. Not today, not even this year, but someday. When I have proven to myself and everyone else that I can do this on my own, then I will choose to do it with you." Samuel slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. They kissed there on the riverbank as the sun sank below the horizon, and Beatrice felt like the luckiest woman alive. The next 3 years were hard but good. Beatrice proved up her claim bit by bit, meeting every requirement the land office set. She built a barn, expanded her cabin, planted a vegetable garden that flourished in the deeper soil. Her orchard grew, young trees pushing toward the sky, their roots working between the rocks that had broken her first plow. Samuel's cattle grazed her land, and she managed accounts for his ranch and 2 others, bringing in enough income to not just survive but to thrive. They kept their engagement quiet, though Beatrice wore the ring on a chain around her neck, close to her heart. Some people guessed, and Sarah Hendricks congratulated her with a knowing smile, but mostly they were allowed to court in relative peace. In the spring of 1881, disaster struck. A late frost hit the valley, unexpected and devastating, killing half of Beatrice's young apple trees. She stood in her orchard looking at the blackened leaves, the dying branches, and felt her heart break. 3 years of work, thousands of dollars invested, and half of it was gone in a single night. Samuel found her there at noon, still standing among the dead trees, silent tears streaming down her face. He did not say anything, just wrapped his arms around her and held her while she cried out her grief and frustration. "I cannot replant," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "I do not have the money, and even if I did, the trees would not mature before my 5 years are up. The land office is going to say I did not properly improve the land." "Then we fight them on it," Samuel said fiercely. "You have a home, you have a barn, you have productive grazing land. Half an orchard still counts as improvement." "Does it? We will make it count." They did fight when the land office inspector came in the fall of 1882 and questioned whether Beatrice had met the improvement requirements. Samuel stood beside her, along with Sarah Hendricks and 2 other ranchers she had worked for, all of them testifying to the work she had done, the improvements she had made. The inspector walked her property, examined her cabin and barn, counted her surviving apple trees and the cattle grazing her land. In the end, he approved her claim. In November of 1883, 5 years and 1 month after she had first staked her claim, Beatrice Fontaine received the deed to her 160 acres. It was hers, truly and completely, and no one could ever take it away. She married Samuel Ortiz 3 weeks later, on a clear December day with half of Jamestown in attendance. Sarah Hendricks stood up as her witness, and Samuel's foreman stood up for him, and they exchanged vows in the church on the hill overlooking the valley. Beatrice wore the green dress Samuel had bought her in Sacramento and wildflowers in her hair, and she had never felt more beautiful or more certain of anything in her life. Their wedding night was spent at the ranch house, in the room that had been Samuel's mother's and that Beatrice had already begun to make her own. Samuel was gentle and patient, and if they were both nervous, they were also joyful, discovering each other with wonder and laughter and love. "I have been thinking," Beatrice said afterward, lying in the circle of Samuel's arms, "about combining operations like you mentioned." "Oh," Samuel's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Your cattle already graze my land. What if we expanded the orchard, replanted the trees we lost, and added more? We could sell fruit to Sacramento, maybe even San Francisco. Between the cattle and the orchard, we would have 2 income sources, more security." "I think that is a brilliant idea. We could use the creek on your land to irrigate, maybe even put in a proper system." They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming, 2 stubborn people who had found in each other a perfect match. Beatrice had her independence and her partner, her land and her love, and for the first time since her parents died, she felt completely at home. The years that followed were full. Beatrice and Samuel replanted and expanded the orchard, eventually growing it to cover 30 acres with a mix of apples, pears, and cherries. The fruit trees flourished, their roots spreading deep between the rocks, and within 5 years they were producing enough fruit to ship to markets as far as San Francisco. The cattle operation expanded as well. Samuel bought more land to the east, and they ran a combined herd of over 500 head. Beatrice managed all the finances, her accounting skills keeping them profitable even in lean years. They built a new barn on her original property and renovated the ranch house, modernizing it while keeping the character that Samuel's parents had built. In the spring of 1885, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The baby came in January of 1886, a boy they named James after Samuel's father. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin, and he filled their lives with joy and chaos in equal measure. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, Clara, with blonde hair that must have come from some distant relative and a laugh that sounded like bells. And 3 years after that, another boy, Thomas, who was quieter than his siblings but watched everything with solemn, thoughtful eyes. Beatrice threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she had brought to proving up her land, but she never stopped working the ranch and orchard alongside Samuel. They were partners in everything, sharing the labor and the decisions, and their children grew up understanding that their mother was every bit as capable as their father. Sarah Hendricks became a frequent visitor, teaching Clara to ride almost before the girl could walk and regaling all 3 children with stories of the old days, when their mother had first arrived with nothing but determination and a broken plow. Martinez doted on the children shamelessly, sneaking them treats and teaching them Spanish words that sometimes made Beatrice blush. The community of Jamestown grew and changed around them. Some of the old homesteaders moved on, chasing new opportunities or admitting defeat. New families arrived, drawn by the agricultural possibilities of the valley. Beatrice helped several women file their own claims, offering advice and support drawn from her own hard experience. In 1892, a group of investors came through talking about turning Jamestown into a modern town with paved streets and electric lights. Samuel and Beatrice attended the town meetings, listening to the proposals, and eventually voted in favor of modest improvements while fighting to preserve the character of the place they loved. "Things change," Beatrice said one night, watching from their porch as the first electric streetlights flickered on in the distant town. "But not always for the worse." "You have changed too," Samuel observed. "When I first met you, you were so afraid of needing anyone. Now look at you, surrounded by family and friends and community." "I learned that independence does not mean being alone," Beatrice said, leaning into her husband's side. "It means having the freedom to choose who and what you let into your life. I choose you every day. And I choose you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the yard, the orchard trees heavy with spring blossoms, the cattle dotting the hills. The land that had once broken plows now sustained their family, and Beatrice thought about how things that seemed impossible often just required a different approach. In 1895, James turned 9 and announced he wanted to learn about the cattle business. Samuel took him out on his first roundup, teaching him the skills that had been passed down from grandfather to father to son. Clara, at 7, declared she was more interested in the orchard and spent hours helping Beatrice with the trees, learning to prune and graft and nurture. Thomas, at 5, surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for numbers. He would sit in Beatrice's office while she worked, asking questions about the ledgers, and by age 6 could do arithmetic in his head that impressed even his mathematics-inclined mother. "We are raising our successors," Samuel observed one evening, watching Thomas carefully write out a column of figures. "We are raising them to make their own choices," Beatrice corrected. "But yes, if they want to continue what we have built, I think we would be proud." The turn of the century came and went, and with it, new challenges and opportunities. The railroad expanded, making it easier to ship fruit to distant markets. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, though Samuel insisted horses were more reliable. The world was changing rapidly, becoming modern and electric and fast, but the rhythms of ranching and farming remained timeless. In 1903, Beatrice's aunt in St. Louis died, leaving her a small inheritance. Beatrice used the money to build a school on the edge of their property, hiring a teacher to educate not just their own children, but the children of all the families working the valley. It was her way of giving back, of creating opportunity for others the way the Homestead Act had created opportunity for her. James grew into a tall, capable young man who loved the cattle business as much as his father did. Clara inherited her mother's stubbornness and her father's way with living things, and she transformed the orchard into something spectacular, introducing new varieties and improving their yields. Thomas proved to be a natural businessman, taking over more and more of the financial management as he grew older. In 1908, 25 years after their wedding, Samuel planned an anniversary celebration. He wanted to throw a huge party, invite everyone they knew, but Beatrice insisted on something quieter. "Just family," she said. "Our children, Sarah if she wants to come, Martinez, the people who matter most." They had dinner in the renovated ranch house, around the same table where Samuel had first told Beatrice he loved her. The children, now young adults, toasted their parents with wine and embarrassing stories. Sarah told tales of Beatrice's early days that made everyone laugh. Martinez presented them with a cake that was a work of art. After dinner, Samuel took Beatrice's hand and led her outside, away from the noise and celebration, to the spot where they had first stood together on her land all those years ago. "I want to show you something," he said. He led her into the orchard, to a tree she recognized as one of the original plantings, one of the 50 trees that had survived the killing frost of 1881. Carved into the trunk, old but still visible, were their initials, B and S, surrounded by a heart. "When did you do this?" Beatrice asked, running her fingers over the carving. "The day you got your deed. I came out here and marked the tree, my promise that I would love you for as long as it stood." That is incredibly sentimental for someone who claims to be a practical rancher. "I am a practical rancher who is hopelessly in love with his wife." Samuel pulled her close, and even after 25 years of marriage, Beatrice felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time he kissed her. "I love you too," she said. "Even though you carved graffiti into my tree." They stood in the orchard as the sun set, casting long shadows through the branches heavy with nearly ripe fruit, and Beatrice marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate woman with a broken plow to a successful rancher, wife, mother, and pillar of the community. She had wanted independence and had found it, but she had also found something she had not known she needed: partnership, love, family, home. The years continued their steady march. James married a woman from Sacramento and brought her home to the ranch, and they gave Samuel and Beatrice their first grandchildren, twin boys who were hellions from the moment they could crawl. Clara married a man who shared her passion for horticulture, and together they expanded the orchard operation even further, experimenting with new varieties and techniques. Thomas went east to study business at university, but he came back with a degree and a wife who was a lawyer, one of the first women to practice law in California. Together, they modernized the ranch's business operations, setting up contracts and systems that increased their profitability. In 1920, Beatrice turned 65. The world had changed dramatically in her lifetime. The automobile had replaced the horse for most purposes, though Samuel still preferred to ride. The telephone connected them to distant markets. The country had survived a world war, and women finally had the right to vote, a victory Beatrice celebrated with fierce joy. She and Samuel were sitting on the porch one evening, watching their grandchildren play, when he turned to her with a serious expression. "I have been thinking about the future," he said. "You say that a lot." It is worth thinking about. I am 67, Beatrice. I am getting old. We both are. What is your point? My point is that I want to make sure everything is arranged properly. The ranch should go to James. He loves it the way I do. The orchard should go to Clara. She has made it into something beyond what either of us imagined. And the business holdings should go to Thomas, since that is his passion. That is fair, Beatrice agreed. Though I suspect you are going to be around to run things for a good while yet. Maybe. But I want to enjoy my time, Beatrice. I want to spend my days with you doing things we never had time for when we were building all this. Such as traveling, reading, sitting on this porch and watching sunsets, making love in the middle of the afternoon just because we can. Beatrice laughed. Samuel Ortiz, you are scandalous. Only with you. They did begin to step back from the day-to-day operations, letting their children take on more responsibility. They took a trip to San Francisco, staying for a month and exploring the city that had been rebuilt after the great earthquake. They visited the Grand Canyon and Yosemite, marveling at natural wonders they had never had time to see. But they always came back to the ranch, to the land that had brought them together and that they had shaped with their own hands. The orchard now covered 75 acres, the trees mature and productive. The cattle operation ran 1,500 head across 2,000 acres. The little cabin Beatrice had built with her own hands still stood, preserved as a reminder of where they had started. In 1925, Jamestown held a celebration honoring its oldest residents and longest-term landowners. Samuel and Beatrice were among those recognized, having lived and worked in the valley for nearly 50 years. They stood on a stage while the mayor recounted their accomplishments, and Beatrice felt a flush of pride and embarrassment in equal measure. None of this was possible without my wife, Samuel said when asked to speak. When I met Beatrice, she was a woman with a broken plow and 160 acres of rocks. She could have quit. Most people would have. But she refused to give up, and in refusing, she taught me what real determination looks like. Everything we built together. She is my partner in all things, and I am the luckiest man alive to have spent my life with her. Beatrice stood and took the microphone, her voice still strong despite her years. Samuel is too modest. He saved me when I would have failed, not by fixing my problems but by believing I could fix them myself. He taught me that independence and partnership are not opposites, that I could be strong on my own and stronger with someone beside me. This community has been good to us, and we have tried to give back. I hope the next generation does the same. The applause was thunderous, and their children and grandchildren stood cheering, and Beatrice thought that this moment of recognition and love and accomplishment was worth every broken plow and sleepless night and moment of doubt. Samuel's health began to decline in 1928. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for 7 decades. He moved slower, tired more easily, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Beatrice never wavered. On a morning in April of 1929, Beatrice woke to find Samuel watching her with an expression of such tenderness it made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking about how beautiful you are, how blessed I have been." "Samuel, you are being maudlin. I am being honest." He reached out and took her hand. "When I die, and I will die before you because you are too stubborn to go first, I want you to know that you made my life complete. I loved my parents, I love our children and grandchildren, but you, Beatrice, you are the great love of my life." Tears filled her eyes. "You are not dying anytime soon. We have too much left to do. Maybe. But I wanted you to know, just in case." Samuel died peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, in the bed they had shared for 46 years. Beatrice woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. She sat with him for an hour, memorizing every detail of his beloved face, before finally calling their children to say goodbye. The funeral was huge, half the county turning out to honor a man who had been respected and loved by everyone who knew him. Beatrice stood dry-eyed through the service, accepting condolences with grace. But when they lowered him into the ground next to his parents, she finally allowed herself to break. Clara held her on one side, Thomas on the other, and James stood with his hand on her shoulder, and together they mourned the man who had been the center of their family. Beatrice thought she might die of grief in those first weeks. The ranch felt empty without Samuel, every room full of memories, every sunset a reminder of evenings spent on the porch together. But she was still stubborn, still determined, and gradually she found her way back to life. She threw herself into the orchard, working alongside Clara to implement new techniques. She spent time with her grandchildren, now grown with children of their own, passing down stories and wisdom. She continued to manage the financial aspects of the ranch, her mind still sharp even as her body slowed. On what would have been their 50th wedding anniversary, Beatrice walked out to the orchard alone. She found the tree with their initials carved in it, now massive and gnarled with age but still producing fruit every year. She sat beneath its branches and talked to Samuel, telling him about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the orchard and the ranch, about how much she missed him. "But I am not giving up," she said aloud. "You knew I would not. I am too stubborn for that, remember." She stayed until sunset, and when she stood to leave, she felt lighter somehow, as if Samuel's spirit had heard her and approved. Beatrice lived another 15 years, dying peacefully at the age of 88 in 1943. She saw the ranch through the Great Depression, refusing to sell even when times were desperate, finding ways to keep the operation going through sheer determination. She saw the beginning of World War II, sent 2 of her grandsons off to fight, and welcomed them home again. She saw her great-grandchildren grow and marry and start families of their own. When the end came, she was surrounded by family in the house she had shared with Samuel. Her children held her hands as she slipped away, and her last words were soft but clear. "Tell your father I am coming. Tell him I never quit." She was buried next to Samuel under the spreading oak tree on the hill overlooking the valley. The stone read, "Beatrice Fontaine Ortiz, 1855–1943. She refused to quit. Years later, the ranch and orchard were still operating, run by the 4th generation of the family Beatrice and Samuel had built. The original cabin still stood, maintained as a historical landmark. The tree with their initials still produced fruit, over 120 years old and still thriving. And tourists would sometimes stop by, asking about the history of the place, and whoever was working would tell them the story of a woman who came west with nothing but determination, who staked a claim on land that broke every plow, and who refused to quit no matter what obstacles she faced. They would tell about the cowboy who watched her and fell in love, not with her beauty or her charm, but with her sheer, stubborn refusal to give up. It was a story worth telling, of love and land and the kind of determination that changes the world. It was the story of Beatrice and Samuel, of 2 stubborn people who found in each other the perfect match, and who built something that lasted long after they were gone. Their great-great-grandchildren still walked the orchard in spring when the trees bloomed, still ran cattle across the hills, still managed the finances with the same careful attention Beatrice had taught them. The land that had once broken plows now sustained generations, and the love story that had started with a woman refusing to quit had become the foundation of a legacy that would endure for generations to come.